The private jet trembled as it cut through turbulent skies, but the real storm was brewing inside the luxurious cabin. What started as a routine business flight to finalize the biggest merger in corporate history was about to become a battleground where loyalties would be tested, secrets would be exposed, and one woman's fight for survival would shake the very foundations of a billion-dollar empire. At 40,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no escape from the explosive confrontation that would change everything. The Gulfstream G650 sliced through the morning clouds like a silver arrow, carrying the most powerful people in the corporate world toward what everyone believed would be a historic moment. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, adjusted her silk scarf and gazed out the window at the endless blue below. The merger with Blackstone Corporation was supposed to be her crowning achievement, the deal that would cement her legacy as one of the most successful businesswomen of her generation. Seated across from her in the opulent cabin was Marcus Blackstone, the enigmatic founder and chairman of Blackstone Corporation. His steel-gray eyes reflected years of ruthless business dealings, and his reputation for crushing competitors was legendary in corporate circles. Today, however, he wore an uncharacteristic smile as he reviewed the merger documents spread across the polished mahogany table between them. "This partnership will revolutionize the tech industry," Marcus said, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had never known defeat. Sterling's innovation, combined with Blackstone's resources and market reach, will be unstoppable. Victoria nodded, though something in his tone made her slightly uneasy. She had built Sterling Industries from nothing, transforming it from a small startup in her garage into a multinational corporation worth $15 billion. The company was her life's work, her passion, her everything. But the pressures of competing with tech giants had forced her to consider this merger, despite her reservations about Marcus's aggressive business tactics. Also present in the cabin were key members of both leadership teams. James Crawford, Victoria's longtime business partner and chief technology officer, sat near the front of the plane, his laptop open as he made final adjustments to the technical specifications of the merger. He had been Victoria's closest advisor for over a decade, and she trusted his judgment implicitly. His expertise in artificial intelligence and machine learning had been instrumental in Sterling Industries' rapid growth. Behind them sat Elena Rodriguez, Blackstone's chief financial officer, whose reputation for finding profitable opportunities in any market condition had made her indispensable to Marcus. She was known for her sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty to the Blackstone brand. Her financial models had predicted the merger would generate over $50 billion in revenue within the first 3 years. The plane's interior reflected the wealth and status of its passengers. Cream-colored leather seats were arranged in a spacious configuration, allowing for both private conversations and group meetings. A fully equipped bar occupied one corner, while a conference area with a large screen dominated the center of the cabin. Every detail had been carefully designed to project power and success. David Chun, the pilot, had been flying corporate executives for over 20 years. He had seen deals made and broken at cruising altitude, witnessed celebrations and confrontations, but he had never experienced anything quite like what was about to unfold. His co-pilot, Sarah Mitchell, was relatively new to the corporate aviation world, but her skills and professionalism had quickly earned her a reputation as one of the best in the business. As the jet continued its journey toward the Blackstone Corporation headquarters in Switzerland, where the merger would be officially signed, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had built her success on trusting her instincts, and right now, those instincts were telling her to be cautious. The merger terms seemed too favorable. Marcus's enthusiasm seemed forced, and Elena's constant note-taking felt more like surveillance than preparation. "Before we finalize anything," Victoria said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over the cabin, "I want to review the employment protection clauses one more time. My people have been loyal to Sterling Industries for years, and I won't agree to any deal that puts their jobs at risk." Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. Of course, Victoria. That's why you're perfect for this partnership. You care about people, not just profits. Don't worry. Every Sterling employee will be protected under the new structure. But even as he spoke these reassuring words, Elena was exchanging glances with two men seated near the back of the plane. These were not typical corporate executives. They were security personnel hired specifically for this trip, though their true purpose remained unclear to Victoria and her team. James looked up from his laptop, concern etched across his face. Victoria, I'm seeing some irregularities in the integration timeline. According to these documents, Blackstone wants to assume control of Sterling's intellectual property immediately after signing, but the compensation structure shows payments spread over 5 years. That's not what we agreed to in the preliminary negotiations. The atmosphere in the cabin suddenly grew tense. Victoria felt her heart rate increase as she realized that James might have uncovered something significant. She had always been meticulous about contract details, and any deviation from their agreed terms was unacceptable. Let me see those documents, Victoria demanded, reaching across the table toward Elena's briefcase. But as she did, one of the security men stood up and moved closer to their seating area. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Marcus said, his voice now carrying an edge that hadn't been there moments before. The terms we're offering are more than generous, considering Sterling's current market position. Victoria's blood ran cold as she began to understand what was happening. This wasn't a merger negotiation. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership. Marcus had lured her onto this private jet, miles above the ocean, where she had no escape and no way to contact her legal team or board of directors. You're trying to steal my company, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. This entire merger was a setup. Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. Sterling Industries is hemorrhaging money, Victoria. Your company is on the verge of bankruptcy, and you know it. The artificial intelligence patents you've developed are worth billions, but you lack the infrastructure to monetize them properly. I'm offering you a way out that allows you to maintain some dignity and walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. That's a lot. James interjected, closing his laptop and standing up. Sterling Industries is financially sound. We've got contracts worth $8 billion in the pipeline, and our AI technology is years ahead of anything Blackstone has developed. Elena finally spoke up, her voice cold and calculated. Those contracts are contingent on patents that Blackstone has just acquired through a subsidiary purchase. As of this morning, Sterling Industries no longer owns the intellectual property necessary to fulfill those agreements. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had been outmaneuvered by one of the most ruthless corporate raiders in the world, and she was trapped at 40,000 feet with nowhere to turn for help. The merger documents she had been reviewing were essentially surrender papers, designed to transfer control of her life's work to Marcus Blackstone for a fraction of its true value. I won't sign, Victoria declared, her voice growing stronger as her initial shock transformed into determination. I'd rather see Sterling Industries burn than hand it over to someone like you. Marcus's expression darkened. That can be arranged, Victoria, but it would be much easier for everyone involved if you simply signed the papers and accepted reality. Your company is finished either way. The only question is whether you walk away with something or lose everything. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing the cabin to shake and the lights to flicker momentarily. In that brief moment of chaos, Victoria caught James's eye and saw the same determination she felt burning within herself. They had built Sterling Industries together, fought countless battles to bring it to where it was today, and they weren't going to surrender without a fight. Show me the patent acquisition documents, Victoria demanded. If Blackstone really owns Sterling's intellectual property, you'll have legal proof. Otherwise, this is just another one of your intimidation tactics. Elena reached for her briefcase, but her movement was slow and deliberate, as if she was buying time for something. Victoria noticed that one of the security men had moved to block the aisle leading to the cockpit, while the other had positioned himself near the emergency exit. The realization that she was essentially a prisoner on this aircraft sent chills down her spine. "The documentation is being finalized as we speak," Marcus said. "By the time we land in Switzerland, everything will be official. Your board of directors received the acquisition notice an hour ago, and your employees are being informed of the transition as we speak." Victoria's mind raced as she tried to process the full scope of Marcus's betrayal. He had orchestrated a complete corporate coup, using inside information and legal manipulation to destroy her company while she was trapped on this plane, unable to defend herself or her employees. The merger meeting had been nothing more than a distraction, designed to keep her away from Sterling Industries headquarters while Blackstone executed their hostile takeover. "You underestimate me, Marcus," Victoria said, reaching for her phone. "I still have allies, people who won't let you get away with this." But as she attempted to make a call, she discovered that her phone had no signal. The plane's communication system had been disabled, cutting her off from the outside world completely. Marcus smiled at her growing realization of how thoroughly she had been trapped. "I'm afraid you'll find that all communication systems are currently offline for security purposes," he said with mock sympathy. "We can't have any sensitive merger information leaking to competitors during these final negotiations." James moved closer to Victoria, his protective instincts overriding his concern for his own safety. "This is kidnapping, Marcus. You can't force someone to sign legal documents under duress. Any merger completed this way will be invalid in court. That's assuming anyone ever finds out about the circumstances," Elena interjected. "As far as the outside world knows, Victoria Sterling flew to Switzerland to finalize a mutually beneficial merger with Blackstone Corporation. The press releases have already been prepared, and Sterling's board has received documentation showing Victoria's full approval of all merger terms." The sophisticated nature of Marcus's plan became clear to Victoria as she realized he had been setting this trap for months, possibly years. Every friendly interaction, every business dinner, every seemingly innocent conversation had been part of an elaborate scheme to position her company for this hostile takeover. She had been played by a master manipulator who had turned her own success against her. The plane continued its steady flight towards Switzerland, carrying Victoria toward what Marcus intended to be the end of her corporate empire and the beginning of his total domination of the artificial intelligence industry. But Victoria Sterling hadn't built a $15 billion company by giving up in the face of adversity, and she wasn't about to start now. As she looked around the cabin, assessing her options and searching for any advantage she might exploit, she began planning her counterattack. The battle for Sterling Industries was far from over, and Marcus Blackstone was about to learn that he had underestimated one of the most formidable businesswomen of her generation. The tension in the cabin had become suffocating as Victoria Sterling realized the full extent of the trap that had been set for her. The luxury jet that had initially felt like a symbol of success now felt more like a prison cell, complete with guards disguised as security personnel. But Victoria's mind was working at lightning speed, analyzing every detail of her situation and searching for weaknesses in Marcus's seemingly perfect plan. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Victoria said, her voice carrying a tone of grudging respect that masked the fury burning inside her. "The timing, the isolation, the legal maneuvering. I have to admit, Marcus, this is impressive even by your standards." Marcus preened at what he interpreted as admission of defeat. "I've been planning this acquisition for 3 years, Victoria. Sterling Industries has technology that could revolutionize everything from autonomous vehicles to space exploration, but you've been too conservative in your approach to market development. Under Blackstone's leadership, that technology will reach its full potential. You mean under your control, the technology will make you even more obscenely wealthy while destroying the innovative culture that created it in the first place?" James interjected, his anger barely contained. "Sterling Industries isn't just about patents and profit margins. It's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible and creating technology that actually improves people's lives." Elena laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the cabin. How wonderfully idealistic. That's exactly the kind of thinking that's kept Sterling Industries from achieving true market dominance. Marcus understands that in the modern economy, sentiment is a luxury that successful companies can't afford. Victoria studied Elena's face carefully, noting the way her eyes kept darting toward her briefcase and the nervous energy in her movements. Despite her confident words, there was something about Elena's behavior that suggested she wasn't as comfortable with this situation as she pretended to be. Victoria filed this observation away, knowing that any sign of doubt or discomfort among her captors could potentially be exploited. The plane's intercom crackled to life, and Captain Chen's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently cruising at 42,000 feet over the North Atlantic. Our estimated arrival time in Geneva remains on schedule for 3:30 p.m. local time. Weather conditions at our destination are clear with light winds. Victoria noticed that the pilot's announcement was unusually detailed, almost as if he was trying to communicate something beyond basic flight information. She wondered if Captain Chen had picked up on the tension in the cabin and was subtly letting them know that he was aware of their situation. The thought gave her a small measure of hope, as the flight crew might represent her only potential allies on this aircraft. Captain Chen has been flying corporate executives for decades, Marcus said, apparently reading Victoria's thoughts. He understands the importance of discretion in sensitive business matters. You'll find that everyone involved in this operation has been carefully selected for their professionalism and reliability. The implication was clear. Marcus had ensured that even the flight crew would not interfere with his plans. But Victoria had learned over the years that loyalty could never be assumed, especially when it was bought rather than earned. She made a mental note to find a way to communicate with the pilots if the opportunity arose. James had returned to his laptop, ostensibly reviewing technical documents, but Victoria could see that he was actually accessing Sterling Industries' secure network through a satellite connection that apparently hadn't been disabled like their phones. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he navigated through encrypted files and communication channels. The integration timeline shows Blackstone taking control of Sterling's research facilities within 48 hours, James said, his voice carefully neutral. That seems unusually aggressive for a friendly merger. Efficiency is one of Blackstone's core values, Elena replied. The longer the integration process takes, the more value is lost due to market uncertainty and employee anxiety. It's better to implement changes quickly and decisively. But Victoria could hear the tension in Elena's voice, and she began to suspect that not everyone on Marcus's team was completely comfortable with the methods being employed. Elena was known throughout the industry for her business acumen, but she had also built a reputation for ethical financial practices. The current situation seemed inconsistent with her professional principles. Victoria decided to test her theory. Elena, you've always been respected for conducting business with integrity. How do you reconcile this hostile takeover with your professional ethics? Surely someone with your reputation understands the difference between aggressive negotiation and corporate fraud. Elena's composure cracked for just a moment, revealing a flash of uncertainty before she regained control. Sometimes business requires difficult decisions, Victoria. The marketplace doesn't always reward pure intentions, but it does reward legal compliance, Victoria pressed. And what's happening here isn't just aggressive business practice, it's criminal conspiracy. You're participating in the theft of a company worth $15 billion, and your financial expertise makes you a key conspirator rather than just a witness. Marcus interrupted before Elena could respond. Enough philosophical debate. Elena is here because she understands that Blackstone's acquisition of Sterling Industries will create value for shareholders, employees, and customers. The method of acquisition is simply a matter of tactical efficiency. Victoria noticed that Marcus had used the word acquisition rather than merger, a subtle but significant distinction that revealed his true intentions. He wasn't interested in combining their companies as equal partners. He was planning to absorb Sterling Industries completely and eliminate any trace of its independent identity. The plane suddenly lurched to one side, causing several documents to slide off the conference table. Through the windows, Victoria could see storm clouds gathering in the distance, their dark masses creating an ominous backdrop for the confrontation unfolding in the cabin. Captain Chen's voice came over the intercom again, informing them that they were adjusting course slightly to avoid areas of severe turbulence. During the brief chaos caused by the plane's movement, Victoria managed to catch James's attention and noticed that he had successfully accessed Sterling Industries' emergency communication protocols. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she could see that he had found something important in the company's secure files. "Marcus," James said, closing his laptop and standing up with renewed confidence. "I think you should know that Sterling Industries' board of directors initiated something called Protocol 7 about 2 hours ago." Marcus's expression shifted from smugness to concern. "What exactly is Protocol 7? Victoria smiled for the first time since discovering Marcus's true intentions. "Protocol 7 is our corporate defense system, designed specifically to protect against hostile takeovers. When activated, it freezes all intellectual property transfers, initiates legal challenges to any unauthorized acquisition attempts, and triggers a comprehensive audit of all Sterling Industries assets and partnerships." Elena opened her briefcase with trembling hands and began frantically reviewing documents on her tablet. Her face grew pale as she read through screens of information. "Marcus, we have a problem. Sterling's legal team has filed injunctions in 12 different jurisdictions, challenging the validity of the subsidiary acquisitions you used to claim their patents." "That's impossible," Marcus snarled. "Those acquisitions were completed through shell companies that can't be traced back to Blackstone Corporation." "Actually, they can be traced," James said with satisfaction. "Sterling Industries' AI security system has been monitoring suspicious patent activity for the past 18 months. Every shell company, every financial transaction, every legal maneuver has been documented and analyzed. We've been watching you build this trap, Marcus, and we've been preparing our countermeasures the entire time." Victoria felt a surge of pride in her team's foresight and preparation. "Did you really think you were the only one capable of long-term strategic planning? Sterling Industries didn't become a $15 billion company by accident. We've been anticipating hostile takeover attempts since our first major breakthrough in artificial intelligence technology." Marcus's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled completely. "It doesn't matter what legal challenges you've prepared. You're still trapped on this plane, and you're still going to sign those merger documents. My associates here will ensure your compliance." The two security men moved closer to Victoria and James, their intentions now unmistakably threatening. But Victoria had one more card to play. "Before you do anything you'll regret, Marcus, you should know that Sterling Industries' AI system has been recording this entire flight through the plane's security cameras and audio systems. Every threat you've made, every admission of criminal intent, has been documented and transmitted to law enforcement agencies in multiple countries." Marcus looked around the cabin wildly, searching for the surveillance equipment that he hadn't known existed. "That's a bluff. This plane's communication systems have been disabled." "The communication systems you know about have been disabled," Victoria corrected. "But Sterling Industries technology is more advanced than you realized. We've been developing next-generation satellite communication protocols that can't be detected or blocked by conventional jamming equipment. Right now, this conversation is being monitored by the FBI, Interpol, and the Swiss Federal Police." Elena suddenly stood up, her professional composure completely shattered. "Marcus, this has gone too far. If law enforcement agencies are already involved, continuing with this plan will only make things worse for everyone involved. Sit down and stay calm," Marcus ordered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Victoria is lying. She's trying to create panic so she can find a way to escape the consequences of her company's failure." But James was already opening his laptop again, accessing real-time feeds from Sterling Industries Security Center. The FBI's Corporate Crimes Task Force is currently en route to Blackstone Corporation headquarters in Chicago. Swiss authorities are preparing to detain this aircraft when it lands in Geneva. And Interpol has issued international arrest warrants for conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. The plane's intercom crackled again, but this time it wasn't Captain Chin's voice that filled the cabin. Instead, they heard the authoritative tone of an air traffic controller. Blackstone Flight November 77 Alpha. You are directed to change course immediately and proceed to London Heathrow Airport for an emergency landing. This directive is issued under the authority of international law enforcement cooperation protocols. Marcus stared at the speaker in disbelief as the reality of his situation finally became clear. His elaborate plan to steal Sterling Industries had been not only anticipated, but turned against him. Instead of acquiring his rival's company, he had walked into a trap that would likely result in his arrest, prosecution, and the destruction of his own corporate empire. Victoria stood up slowly, her confidence restored as she realized that her company's defensive measures had worked exactly as designed. The choice is yours, Marcus. You can cooperate with law enforcement and possibly negotiate a reduced sentence, or you can continue with this criminal conspiracy and face the full consequences of your actions. But Marcus Blackstone hadn't built his fortune by accepting defeat easily. As the plane began its course correction toward London, he was already planning one final, desperate gambit that would determine whether he emerged from this confrontation as a prisoner or found some way to salvage his position. The battle for Sterling Industries was entering its most dangerous phase, and Victoria was about to discover that a cornered predator was capable of extreme and unpredictable violence. The atmosphere aboard the luxury jet had transformed from corporate tension to barely contained violence as Marcus Blackstone realized his elaborate scheme was collapsing around him. The course change toward London Heathrow had been confirmed by Captain Chun, whose voice carried a subtle note of relief as he acknowledged the air traffic controller's instructions. But Marcus wasn't ready to surrender, and his desperation was making him increasingly dangerous. "This isn't over, Victoria," Marcus said, his voice low and menacing as he gestured to his security personnel. "You may think you've outmaneuvered me, but you're forgetting that we're still at 40,000 feet, and I control this aircraft." Victoria felt her heart rate spike as she recognized the threat in Marcus's words. She had assumed that the involvement of international law enforcement would force him to accept defeat, but she had underestimated his willingness to escalate the situation beyond rational business competition into potentially violent confrontation. James moved protectively closer to Victoria, his eyes fixed on the two security men who were now openly displaying the weapons concealed beneath their jackets. "Marcus, you need to think about what you're doing. We've already established that law enforcement agencies are monitoring this situation. Any violence against us will only add assault and kidnapping charges to your existing legal problems." Elena had retreated to the far corner of the cabin, clutching her briefcase as if it were a shield. Her face was pale with fear as she realized that her involvement in Marcus's plan had put her in the middle of a situation that was spiraling completely out of control. "Marcus, please, we need to land in London and cooperate with the authorities. This has gone far beyond corporate acquisition into criminal territory." "Elena's right," Victoria said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through her system. "You're a brilliant businessman, Marcus, but you're not a criminal. Don't destroy your entire life over one failed acquisition attempt." Marcus laughed, but the sound held no humor. "One failed acquisition? Victoria, you have no idea what's at stake here. Blackstone Corporation has committed everything to acquiring Sterling Industries' AI technology. Without those patents, my company will be bankrupt within 6 months. I've leveraged every asset, borrowed against every property, and promised investors returns that can only be delivered through this merger." The revelation of Marcus's financial desperation added a new dimension to Victoria's understanding of the situation. She had assumed that his attempted hostile takeover was driven by greed and ambition, but Now she realized it was actually motivated by panic and the fear of losing everything he had built over decades of ruthless business practices. Then, we can work together to find a solution, Victoria offered, recognizing that a desperate Marcus was far more dangerous than a greedy one. Sterling Industries is always open to legitimate partnerships and licensing agreements. We don't have to be enemies in this industry. It's too late for partnerships, Marcus replied, his voice heavy with bitter resignation. The contracts I've signed, the promises I've made, the debts I've accumulated, they all require complete ownership of Sterling's intellectual property. A licensing agreement won't generate enough revenue to save Blackstone Corporation from bankruptcy. One of the security men, a tall figure with military bearing whose nameplate read Thompson, stepped forward. Mr. Blackstone, we need to make a decision about how to proceed. The aircraft is currently under the oversight of international authorities, and our options are becoming increasingly limited. Victoria studied Thompson's face carefully, noting the professional detachment in his expression. Unlike Marcus, who was clearly operating from emotion and desperation, Thompson appeared to be evaluating the situation with cold tactical precision. She wondered if his military background had taught him to recognize when a mission had become untenable and retreat was the only viable option. The plane hit another patch of turbulence, and the sudden movement caused Elena to drop her briefcase. Documents scattered across the cabin floor, and Victoria caught a glimpse of financial statements showing Blackstone Corporation's dire cash flow situation. The numbers were even worse than Marcus had implied. The company was essentially insolvent and being kept afloat only through increasingly desperate borrowing arrangements. James had been quietly observing the security personnel and the layout of the cabin, and Victoria could see him calculating distances and angles like a chess player planning several moves ahead. His background in competitive martial arts during college had given him insights into physical confrontation that most technology executives never developed. Thompson, James said, addressing the lead security man directly. You strike me as someone who understands the importance of legal compliance in security operations. What's happening here isn't corporate protection, it's criminal conspiracy. Are you prepared to risk your professional reputation and personal freedom for a plan that's already failed? Thompson's expression remained neutral, but Victoria noticed a slight tension in his posture that suggested James's words were having an impact. Military contractors and security professionals typically operated within clearly defined legal boundaries, and the current situation had moved far beyond anything that could be justified as legitimate business protection. The plane's intercom system activated again, but this time the voice belonged to Captain Chen himself. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've received updated instructions from air traffic control, and we'll be making an emergency landing at RAF Mildenhall in the United Kingdom. This facility has been designated as our arrival point to ensure the safety of all passengers and crew. Marcus's face went white as he realized the implications of landing at a military base rather than a civilian airport. RAF Mildenhall was used for sensitive operations that required enhanced security, and its selection as their destination indicated that international law enforcement agencies were treating this situation as a high-priority criminal investigation. Military base, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above the aircraft's ambient noise. They're treating this as a matter of national security. Victoria felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The involvement of military authorities would certainly ensure her safety and the protection of Sterling Industries' assets, but it also indicated that the situation had escalated to levels she hadn't anticipated. She wondered if her company's artificial intelligence technology had implications for national security that she hadn't fully understood. Marcus suddenly stood up and began pacing the limited space of the cabin like a caged animal. RAF Mildenhall means this case will be handled by international intelligence services, not just corporate crimes investigators. They're going to examine every aspect of both our companies, every technology transfer, every research project. Victoria, Do you understand what you've unleashed? I've unleashed the truth, Victoria replied firmly. If Sterling Industries technology has national security implications, then those issues need to be addressed through proper legal channels, not through criminal conspiracy and corporate theft. James pulled out his laptop once more, accessing Sterling Industries' secure communication channels. Victoria, I'm getting reports that Blackstone Corporation's stock price has collapsed. Trading has been suspended, and the SEC has launched an investigation into potential securities fraud. Marcus's financial problems are becoming public knowledge. Elena looked up from where she was attempting to gather the scattered documents. Marcus, the Zurich Banking Consortium, is demanding immediate repayment of the bridge loans you used to finance this operation. They've received reports of potential criminal activity and are invoking the morality clauses in their loan agreements. The financial house of cards that Marcus had constructed was collapsing in real time, and Victoria could see the panic in his eyes as he realized that even if he somehow managed to complete his theft of Sterling Industries, there might not be enough value remaining to save his company from complete destruction. Thompson stepped closer to Marcus and spoke in a low voice that nonetheless carried clearly through the cabin. Sir, we need to discuss exit strategies. The current situation is unsustainable, and continuing with confrontational tactics will only worsen the legal consequences for everyone involved. What exit strategies? Marcus demanded. We're trapped on an aircraft flying toward a military base where we'll be arrested the moment we land. There are no exit strategies, Thompson. There's only victory or total defeat. Victoria realized that Marcus's desperation had pushed him beyond rational decision-making. He was no longer thinking like a businessman evaluating options, but like a gambler who had risked everything on a single bet and watched it fail. In this state of mind, he was capable of making decisions that could endanger everyone aboard the aircraft. Marcus, Victoria said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used in critical board meetings. Look at me. Really look at me. I'm not your enemy. I'm a fellow entrepreneur who understands the pressures of building and maintaining a successful company. But what you're doing now isn't business. It's destruction. Don't let desperation destroy the legacy you've spent decades building. For a moment, Marcus's expression softened, and Victoria thought she might have reached the rational businessman who still existed somewhere beneath the panic and desperation. But then his phone buzzed with an incoming message, and whatever he read on the screen caused his face to harden with renewed determination. That was my board of directors, Marcus said, his voice now carrying a cold finality. Blackstone Corporation's creditors are demanding immediate liquidation. My own board members are voting to remove me as chairman and CEO. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, is being taken away because of your interference. The plane began its descent toward RAF Mildenhall, and Victoria could feel the change in cabin pressure as they dropped altitude. Through the windows, she could see the British countryside spreading below them, peaceful and green in the afternoon sunlight. But inside the cabin, Marcus Blackstone was preparing for one final, desperate gambit that would determine whether they landed safely or whether his desperation would lead to tragedy for everyone aboard. Thompson and his partner exchanged glances that Victoria interpreted as professional consultation about their rapidly deteriorating situation. She hoped that their training and experience would override whatever loyalty or financial incentive Marcus had used to secure their services. The next few minutes would determine whether this corporate confrontation ended with arrests and legal proceedings or escalated into something far more dangerous and unpredictable. The descent toward RAF Mildenhall had begun, and the change in altitude brought with it an atmosphere of finality that affected everyone in the cabin. Victoria Sterling could feel the tension reaching a breaking point as Marcus Blackstone's desperation transformed into something far more dangerous than corporate ambition. The man who had built one of the most successful companies in the technology sector was now cornered, facing the complete destruction of his life's work, and his behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. 20 minutes until landing, Captain Chen's voice announced over the intercom, his professional calm providing a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in the passenger cabin. All passengers should return to their seats and prepare for arrival procedures. Marcus ignored the captain's instruction and continued pacing, his phone clutched in his hand as he read message after message detailing the collapse of his corporate empire. Bankruptcy proceedings initiated, he muttered, reading from his screen. Assets frozen. Criminal investigation expanded. Board of Directors unanimous vote of no confidence. Victoria watched Marcus's deteriorating mental state with growing concern. She had seen powerful executives crack under pressure before, but never in a situation where their breakdown could endanger the lives of everyone around them. The confined space of the aircraft, combined with the presence of armed security personnel who were becoming increasingly nervous about their situation, created a volatile environment that could explode into violence with little warning. Elena Rodriguez had managed to gather most of her scattered documents and was now seated as far from Marcus as the cabin's configuration allowed. Her earlier confidence in Blackstone's financial models and acquisition strategies had been replaced by obvious fear as she realized how thoroughly she had misjudged both the situation and her employer's psychological stability. Elena, Victoria called out, her voice gentle but authoritative. You're not responsible for Marcus's decisions, and you don't have to go down with his ship. You're one of the most respected financial executives in the industry, and your career can survive this if you make the right choices now. Elena looked up, her eyes reflecting the internal struggle between loyalty to her employer and recognition of the criminal nature of their actions. I never thought it would go this far, she said quietly. Marcus told me this was aggressive acquisition strategy, not criminal conspiracy. I should have recognized the warning signs. James Sterling had been monitoring communications through his laptop and looked up with an expression of grave concern. Victoria, I'm receiving reports that the FBI has executed search warrants at multiple Blackstone Corporation facilities. They found evidence of systematic corporate espionage, patent fraud, and financial manipulation targeting not just Sterling Industries, but at least 6 other technology companies. The revelation that Marcus's criminal activities extended far beyond their current situation seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stopped pacing and stared at James with an expression of disbelief and rage. That's impossible. Those operations were conducted through completely separate corporate entities with no traceable connections to Blackstone Corporation. Apparently your AI security was less sophisticated than you believed, Victoria replied. Sterling Industries technology has been tracking and analyzing suspicious patent activities across the entire technology sector. Your various shell companies and subsidiary acquisitions created a pattern that our artificial intelligence systems identified and documented. Thompson, the lead security officer, stepped closer to Marcus with obvious concern. Sir, we need to discuss our situation realistically. The evidence against Blackstone Corporation appears to be extensive, and continuing with any form of confrontation will only worsen the legal consequences for everyone involved. Marcus turned on Thompson with fury. I'm paying you to provide security solutions, not legal advice. Your job is to ensure that I maintain control of this situation until we can land and implement alternative strategies. Actually, sir, our contract specifically states that we provide protection services within legal boundaries. Thompson replied, his military bearing evident in his posture and tone. What you're requesting now falls outside those parameters and could constitute criminal conspiracy. Victoria sensed an opportunity to exploit the growing division between Marcus and his security team. Thompson, you and your partner are military veterans, aren't you? You understand the importance of following lawful orders and the consequences of participating in criminal activities. Thompson nodded slightly, and Victoria could see that her assessment was correct. Ma'am, our training emphasized the distinction between legitimate security operations and criminal activity. The current situation has moved beyond our authorized scope of work. The second security officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, spoke up for the first time. Mr. Blackstone, We need to clarify our rules of engagement. If law enforcement agencies are involved and criminal charges are pending, our participation in any coercive activities would violate federal statutes. Marcus's face flushed red with anger as he realized that his own security team was abandoning him. You're all cowards. I made you rich, I gave you opportunities, and now you're turning against me when I need loyalty most. Marcus, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances, listen to what everyone is telling you. This isn't betrayal, it's reality. We can't change what's happened, but we can still make choices about how this ends. The aircraft continued its descent, and Victoria could now see RAF Mildenhall in the distance, its runways and control towers clearly visible through the cabin windows. She could also see multiple vehicles positioned around the landing area, indicating that a substantial law enforcement presence was waiting for their arrival. James closed his laptop and moved closer to Victoria. The Sterling Industries legal team has been in communication with the authorities. They've confirmed that we'll be treated as victims and witnesses rather than suspects, but Marcus and Elena will likely be detained immediately upon landing. What about Thompson and Martinez? Victoria asked, recognizing that the security officer's cooperation could be crucial to ensuring a peaceful conclusion to this confrontation. Their status will depend on their level of cooperation and whether they participated voluntarily in the criminal conspiracy, James replied. If they can demonstrate that they were misled about the nature of their assignment, they'll likely be treated as witnesses rather than co-conspirators. Thompson and Martinez exchanged glances that Victoria interpreted as professional consultation about their rapidly evolving situation. She could see them weighing their options and reaching the conclusion that their best chance of avoiding criminal charges lay in distancing themselves from Marcus's increasingly desperate actions. Marcus suddenly grabbed his phone and began dialing, his movements frantic and erratic. I'm calling the Swiss authorities directly. This aircraft is registered in Switzerland, and they have no jurisdiction over corporate disputes between American companies. Marcus, stop, Elena pleaded. You're just making things worse. The Swiss banking consortium has already frozen Blackstone's assets based on the criminal investigation. Contacting Swiss authorities won't help. It will just provide additional evidence of your attempts to obstruct justice. But Marcus wasn't listening to reason anymore. His years of success and absolute control had not prepared him for total failure and complete powerlessness. As the reality of his situation became undeniable, his behavior became increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. The plane's intercom activated once more, and Captain Chen's voice filled the cabin with unmistakable urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach to RAF Mildenhall. For everyone's safety, all passengers must return to their seats immediately and prepare for landing. Victoria realized that this was likely her last opportunity to defuse the situation before they landed, and Marcus's desperation led him to take some form of violent action. She stood up slowly, maintaining eye contact with Thompson and Martinez to ensure they understood she wasn't attempting anything threatening. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying the authority and confidence that had made her one of the most successful executives of her generation. Look around this cabin. Really look at what's happening. Elena is terrified. Your security team is ready to abandon you. The authorities are waiting for us on the ground. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's over. Marcus looked up from his phone, his eyes wild with desperation and rage. It's not over until I say it's over, Victoria. You may have destroyed my company, but I still have options. I still have ways to ensure that you pay for what you've done. The menace in his voice sent chills through Victoria as she realized that Marcus was no longer thinking rationally about business competition or even criminal conspiracy. He was thinking about revenge, and in his current mental state, he was capable of actions that could endanger everyone aboard the aircraft. As the landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir that could be felt throughout the cabin, Victoria braced herself for what she feared would be Marcus's final, desperate attempt to salvage something from his failed scheme. The next few minutes would determine whether they all walked away from this aircraft safely or whether Marcus Blackstone's desperation would lead to tragedy that would forever change their lives, and the companies they had spent decades building, the RAF Mildenhall runway, stretched ahead of them like a concrete lifeline as Captain Chen expertly guided the aircraft through its final approach. Victoria Sterling could see the extensive law enforcement presence assembled on the ground. Black SUVs, uniformed officers, and what appeared to be specialized tactical units positioned strategically around the landing area. The sight should have been reassuring, but Marcus Blackstone's increasingly erratic behavior had created an atmosphere of impending violence that made everyone in the cabin tense with apprehension. 30 seconds to touchdown, Captain Chen announced, his professional composure masking what Victoria suspected was considerable stress about the situation he was bringing to ground level. Marcus had stopped pacing and was now standing near the emergency exit, his hand resting on what appeared to be an emergency release mechanism. Thompson and Martinez had positioned themselves strategically in the cabin, clearly preparing to intervene if Marcus attempted something dangerous. But their movement had to be subtle to avoid triggering a confrontation while the aircraft was still in its most vulnerable phase of flight. "Marcus, step away from that door," Elena commanded, her voice carrying an authority that Victoria hadn't heard from her before. Emergency exits can't be opened at altitude, but you could still damage critical systems and endanger everyone aboard this aircraft. Endanger everyone? Marcus laughed, the sound hollow and disturbing. "My entire life is ending, Elena. Everything I built, everything I accomplished, everything I am, it's all being destroyed by these people. Why should I care about anyone else's safety?" Victoria felt her heart racing as she realized that Marcus had moved beyond desperation into something that resembled a complete psychological breakdown. Years of absolute power and control had not prepared him for total defeat, and his mind was fracturing under the pressure of losing everything he had worked decades to achieve. James had been quietly communicating through his laptop's satellite connection, and he looked up with an expression of grim determination. "Marcus, you need to know that Sterling Industries security protocols have identified explosive devices in your carry-on luggage. The authorities are aware of this situation, and any aggressive action on your part will be met with immediate tactical response." The revelation that Marcus had brought explosives aboard the aircraft sent shockwaves through the cabin. Elena gasped and moved as far away from Marcus as possible, while Thompson and Martinez immediately shifted into combat-ready postures, their training overriding any remaining loyalty to their employer. "Those aren't explosives," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They're demonstration devices for Blackstone's new security technology. Completely harmless prototypes." Thompson stepped forward, his military bearing now fully evident as he assessed the threat level. "Sir, I need you to move away from your luggage and step into the center of the cabin where we can ensure everyone's safety." "I'm not taking orders from my own security team," Marcus shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. "You work for me. All of you work for me." The aircraft touched down with a gentle bump, and Victoria felt the familiar sensation of rapid deceleration as Captain Chen applied the brakes. Through the windows, she could see law enforcement vehicles moving into position alongside the aircraft, their occupants clearly visible as they prepared for whatever confrontation might emerge from the cabin. Elena suddenly stood up and began moving toward the front of the aircraft. "I can't be part of this anymore, Marcus. I refuse to participate in whatever you're planning. These people don't deserve to be hurt because of your failures." Marcus's expression shifted from desperation to cold fury as he watched Elena walking away from him. "You're all abandoning me. After everything I've done for you, after all the opportunities I've provided, you're choosing to side with people who want to destroy me. We're choosing to side with sanity and legality," Thompson said firmly. "Sir, I'm ordering you to step away from that luggage and submit to peaceful detention. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force." Victoria realized that Thompson had just made a crucial decision. He was no longer acting as Marcus's employee, but as a professional security officer responding to a legitimate threat. His military training had taught him to recognize when a situation required decisive action to protect innocent lives. The aircraft came to a complete stop, and Victoria could hear the distinctive sound of ground vehicles surrounding them. Captain Chin's voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at RAF Mildenhall. Please remain in your seats until further instructions from the authorities." But Marcus wasn't listening to instructions anymore. His hand moved toward his carry-on bag, and Victoria saw Thompson and Martinez react with the lightning-quick reflexes of trained combat veterans. Thompson tackled Marcus before he could reach his luggage, while Martinez secured the bag and began examining its contents with the expertise of someone familiar with explosive devices. "Clear," Martinez called out after a tense few seconds of examination. "No explosive devices detected. These appear to be electronic components, possibly surveillance equipment." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that Marcus's threats had been largely psychological manipulation rather than genuine physical danger. But her relief was tempered by the recognition that his desperation had still created a situation that could have resulted in tragedy for everyone aboard the aircraft. Elena was openly weeping now, the stress and fear of the past few hours finally overwhelming her professional composure. "I'm so sorry, Victoria. I never wanted any of this to happen. Marcus convinced me that this was legitimate business strategy, not criminal conspiracy." "Elena, you're not responsible for his choices," Victoria replied, her voice gentle despite everything that had happened. "You can still salvage your career and your reputation by cooperating fully with the investigation." The cabin door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and tactical officers in full gear entered the aircraft with professional efficiency. Their leader, a woman whose tactical vest identified her as Commander Sarah Mitchell, quickly assessed the situation and began issuing orders to secure each passenger individually. "Victoria Sterling and James Crawford, you're requested to exit first for debriefing as witnesses," Commander Mitchell announced. "Elena Rodriguez, you'll be detained for questioning regarding financial crimes. Marcus Blackstone, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping." As Victoria gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the aircraft, she caught one final glimpse of Marcus Blackstone. The man who had once commanded one of the most powerful corporations in the technology industry was now seated in restraints, his empire in ruins, and his freedom forfeit. His face showed no anger anymore, only the hollow expression of someone who had lost everything and, finally, understood the true cost of his actions. Thompson and Martinez were escorted off the aircraft separately, their cooperation with authorities during the crisis likely to result in reduced charges or immunity in exchange for testimony. Elena followed them, her head bowed as she faced the reality of criminal prosecution and the destruction of her once sterling reputation in the financial industry. James walked beside Victoria as they descended the aircraft stairs into the cool British afternoon. "It's over," he said quietly, his voice carrying both relief and exhaustion. "Sterling Industries is safe, and Marcus won't be able to threaten anyone else's company for a very long time." Victoria nodded, but her thoughts were already turning to the challenges ahead. The attempted hostile takeover had been defeated, but the experience had revealed vulnerabilities in Sterling Industries security and operations that needed to be addressed. More importantly, she had learned valuable lessons about the price of success and the lengths to which desperate competitors might go to steal what they couldn't create themselves. As they were led toward the waiting law enforcement vehicles for debriefing, Victoria looked back at the aircraft that had been both prison and battleground for the most intense corporate confrontation of her career. The luxury jet that had started the day as a symbol of business success had become a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of ethical leadership in an industry where technology could reshape the world. The sun was setting over RAF Mildenhall as Victoria Sterling began the process of recounting the day's events to investigators. Tomorrow, she would return to Sterling Industries with a renewed appreciation for the company she had built and the people who had helped her protect it. Marcus Blackstone's attempt to steal her life's work had failed, but the memory of this confrontation would serve as a permanent reminder that in the modern corporate world, success could make you a target for those willing to abandon ethics in pursuit of power. The battle for Sterling Industries was over, but Victoria knew that the war for ethical leadership in the technology industry was just beginning. As she walked toward an uncertain but hopeful future, she carried with her the lessons learned at 40,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, where desperation and determination had collided in a confrontation that would reshape both companies and serve as a cautionary tale for an entire industry.